In this episode of War in Cali, I will cover the neighborhood Rolling 20 Bloods and their beef with the Rolling 30 Harlem Crips. Both these gangs have been rivals for over 30 years, and both have lost many members in this war. The Rolling 20 Bloods have been around for over 40 years and are one of the biggest blood gangs in LA. They're allies with many other blood sets like BPS, Fruittown Brims, and another set that's called the 20 Outlaws. The Rolling 20 Bloods beef with Crip hoods like the West Boulevard Crips, the Schoolyard Crips, the Rolling 30s, and the Rolling 40 Crips. The Rolling 30 Crips are one of the biggest Crip gangs in LA and have a history dating back way over 40 years ago. The 30s are a part of the Rolling O Alliance, so that's Crips to the 30s to the 100s. The 30s beef with blood sets like BPS, the Brim sets including Fruittown, Van Ness, and Hoover Park, and of course, the 20 Bloods. I'm going to go into this rivalry starting back about 20 years ago and go into various points in its beef and end with a more current case. This first case happened April 13, 2000. At 10:30 a.m., a witness would hear gunshots and see a person run towards a green SUV, and the SUV would skirt off. The police would later find two men, Omar Reed and Jermaine Fields, slumped from the gunshots. Both men would die. They were shot in the Rolling 30 Crip area. 2 days prior, a Rolling 20 member was killed, and it was believed to be by the 30s, so this was straight get back. The green SUV was later identified as being Romel Johnson's girlfriend's car, and he was known to drive it. Police would pick Romel up and question him, and tell him his homie identified him in the shooting. Romel would quickly deny being the shooter, and would say Crazy B, another 20 Blood, was the shooter. Romel would say Crazy B told him to drive to the 30s and park. Romel would say he didn't know Crazy B's intentions. He said he jumped out and heard gunshots, and Crazy B returning with a gun. Romel would also be questioned about a robbery, and he told about the plot, who was in on the robbery, and everything that happened. Romel Johnson was sentenced to life. February 16, 2006, around 6:30 a.m., Troy Morris was shot over 10 times in a Rolling 30 turf. He would lose his life. Troy was walking to the bus stop and was on his way to school. He was a student at Santa Monica College. He was also a 30 Crip who went by the name Andy Mack. A witness would see the crime as she watched from her apartment window. She said she seen a man firing and Troy falling to the ground. The shooter stood over him and finished him off. The shooter had a ski mask on, but the witness described a few things in the shooter's appearance to the police. 2 months later, the witness was shown a lineup of photos, and she would pick Vernon Evans as the shooter. February 15, 2006, the day before the shooting. It would be a fight at Santa Monica College. Troy would get jumped by a few other people, and Vernon was one of the people jumping him. A staff member of the college would say, Vernon yelled, "I'ma get you, and I know where you live." Vernon was also talking about smoking Troy to other people. After Troy was shot, he would be at a friend's house talking about the shooting. With many witnesses on campus seeing the fight and the threats he promised, and the witness testimony, and Vernon bragging to other gang members like Raheem Moorhead, a BPS member. Raheem told the police that Vernon shot Troy with 2 guns, and he was bragging about killing him on 38 and Western. Vernon Evans received 50 years to life. April 1st, 2007. Deron Polk walked to a liquor store in Rolling 20 Turf. Deron was from 20s. Deron seen a man looking at him and said, "What's up, blood?" The man would reply by shooting Deron. The police were in an unmarked car in the area and seen the whole thing. Eddie Connor was standing over Deron when he noticed the police, and he would begin to run in the alley. He would throw the gun, but it was later recovered and he was caught. Eddie was from Rolling 30s and was in the area looking for a victim. Just the day before, his cousin, also from 30s, was shot, and it was believed to be by the Rolling 20 Bloods. Eddie would claim self-defense, saying he was threatened by Deron, and it wasn't even his gun. He would say he took Deron's gun after snatching it from him, and he just defended himself, and that's why he shot. Deron would not testify and said Eddie was not the shooter. With police being on the scene and seeing the whole thing, he didn't have a chance. Eddie has been in prison the last 13 years. Eddie Connor is eligible for parole in 2031 because of California's new law. This last case happened on March 14, 2016. A Rolling 20 member, Bradford Smith, aka Baby Slick, will lose his life. Later that night, a white Malibu will be spinning blocks on 30 Crip turf. Members of the 30s will begin blasting out the car. The car will spin back and return fire. An innocent man will be riding on a bike and he will be killed in the crossfire. This was all caught on tape. The shooting happened outside of a liquor store. Weeks prior, the same Malibu was pulled over and the car was full of 20 blood members. Kavion Livingston was the driver and Christopher Griffiths was the passenger. Both later will be arrested from being identified in the recording of the liquor store. While arrested, they both be placed in the same cell. The cell had a recording device. While in the cell, they would both talk about remaining silent and not talking to the police. Christopher would switch up his stories a bunch of times, telling the police he didn't know Kavion like that. Then later telling the police that Kavion told him he did the shooting on his own. Then later said Kavion told him it was another shooter involved. Christopher would say he was at his girlfriend's house, so he couldn't have been in the shooting. Also say he didn't have a phone, which police would tell him that was a lie, because both him and Kavion's phones were tracked together in the same location during the time of the shooting. Christopher would later say another man named Tiny M was the shooter. After they were done questioning Christopher, he was placed back in the cell with Kavion. He would tell Kavion that the police knew his car and that the police knew about the murder. Kavion would question him and ask him did he tell. Christopher would deny snitching. The police will also use their social media accounts where they talked about sliding for Baby Slick. Even though Christopher Griffiths went on a snitching spree, he still received 50 years to life. That will conclude this episode of Warren Cali. If you haven't already, check out my previous videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.